my name is Mathur. I'm from CloudBees, and I'm here today to talk about audit-ready pipelines, Menace or Magic. In my work at CloudBees, I've had the opportunity to work with and learn from a number of enterprises who are building out their pipelines with various goals in mind. It might be speed in, reduced time for delivery, reduced risk and errors, and one that is really important, and especially in regulated industries, is auditability. Thinking about audit as you approach pipeline automation helps you to create processes and pipelines that are audit ready. So what is an audit-ready pipeline? We want pipelines to be the way that we track and provide auditability over the entire DevOps process. A big part of this is a connected tool chain that uses only immutable objects. So you want the entire tool chain connected, all of the tools you're using across your process, part of this orchestrated pipeline, with the data that is being generated from these tools collected as part of that process as well. It should be immutable so that it is repeatable, consistent, and you have confidence in that consistency of process. The entire tool chain is connected in a fully automated process with approval gates. So you want control over progression with these gates that control how, as your pipeline is progressing through the stages, and tracking who is making those approvals along the way. Outputs of all commands should be captured and stored in a common data repository. So everything should be centralized for traceability, and you want every command, every thing that's run, what was run, the outputs from those all to be captured as part of this as well. Only those people who have access should be able to do really anything in the pipeline, and access should be tracked as things are being run. So you want that governance with centralized role-based access control across everything, so you know who touched what and have confidence that they have the authorization to perform any actions. It's really important to have that end-to-end visibility, so everything is tracked in that pipeline, because you want the full audit trail all centralized, from planning or code commit all the way to production, where all of the data is available in one place. And then bringing that data together for an audit event should be easy. So there isn't extra overhead. You can have one-click automated audit reports on top of this trusted data. So this all sounds, kind of big, a lot that needs to be in that one pipeline, but it's possible. But before we get to how we get there, let's talk about the current state of audit and what an audit might look like today for a lot of people out there. So an audit often starts with, that email, which could be a surprise event where, okay, we have an audit, let's start, pulling together what we need to for this audit. It could also be a regularly scheduled event where it's happening monthly. Either way, it can be a stressful event, and it can kick off a complex and involved process of gathering all of the required data. And there are a lot of challenges to this. So we want everything to be connected together, but in reality, we often hear that the current state for people and processes is there are a lot of tools that are not connected. There are manual touch points, so everything is kind of scattered across the tools and people who know what happened. And then when it comes to time to audit, it becomes this process of hunting down and finding that data, tracing your steps to find out what happened and pull together what you need. And if you don't have that central traceability, there might not always be reliable proof of what was executed, and then you don't necessarily have trust in the data itself. All of this leads to time and effort that ends up being spent in the audit process. One of the release managers that we spoke to shared that they have a monthly audit for which they collect data weekly, and that has to be analyzed and kind of brought together every 2 weeks. And it is a process that takes them 18 hours repeatedly on a regular basis. This is a lot of time that is spent to, go through all of this data and pull it together. That could, hopefully be spent doing other more valuable things. So here's an example that pulls from real processes that we've seen, showing all of the places that data needs to be retrieved from across your entire process. And it can become this manual hunt of retracing all of the steps taken across the disparate tools. In this whole line, you see all of the tools that were used to get the code to production that we have to retrace. And so you have to go along these tools and find that kind of common thread of data along the way. And then you have to know, is the data correct? And do you even have all of the data available to you? When you have these manual handoffs between these tools and steps, it becomes much harder to trace exactly what happened and who did what. So let's just take a look at how this process came together. So when you're looking at a production deployment and want to look at what happened, all of the pieces, all of the data involved in that production deployment, one of the enterprises that we spoke to, they start in ServiceNow, where they check the change request to see approvals and what should have been deployed. From there, they go actually into the production environment to go to the deployment target and see what version of software was deployed, verify that it was deployed there, and then taking that version information, they go into their deployment tool and see the processes that were run and make sure that they were run successfully and what then artifact versions were deployed. So using that information, they jump again to another tool, into their artifact management tool, find the versions that are in the artifact management tool and the builds that published those artifact versions. From there, now they go into the build tool that was the source of those artifacts to hunt back and find the build that generated the artifacts and trace back finally into Git to find the Git commit that triggered the build in the first place and the person who was involved in that. When you look at this, this is 6 different hops across numerous tools where you have to follow the trail and find all of the data and pull it from different places, from different tools, potentially looking into log files and even more to get together what you need. And if you have manual handoffs between this, it's a lot of time to find the data, and you might end up having to interrupt developers to recreate data where it's missing as well. So these processes are hard. It's not really repeatable. It's a lot of manual kind of slogging to get the data you need. And there are a lot of risks that could be introduced as well. So risks that are associated with this, it's more time, potentially more errors, more costs associated with this very heavy audit process. And you might not have the data you need. It could be incomplete or not correct, and it could, lead to failed audits, which is a terrible outcome. Another risk that, people don't think of right away is the actual teams who are doing the work to get this data. Going through all this process, potentially 18 hours on a regular basis, can pull teams from the things that they enjoy and provide value in order to, do this hunting between tools to pull the data that's needed. And this can cause frustration. It can lead to disgruntled employees who don't like spending their time doing that. One of the highly regulated, very large enterprises that we spoke to, for them, audit is just a daily part of their lives. It's a regular task. And they have a group, a team of people who are always dedicated to audits and going through logs to find the exact details that they need to deliver these audit requirements. And it's not one group team of people who is constantly on this, because nobody wants to be doing that all the time. Instead, it's a rotation where, everyone has to have that week of audit, being on the audit team and doing something they don't enjoy. But it's a necessity, unfortunately, that hopefully, could be alleviated with more of the strategies we're talking about. So with that, let's see what we can do to create audit-ready pipelines, making this whole process a lot easier and addressing the risks and challenges that we've just been discussing. So to review an audit-ready pipeline, we want to connect the entire tool chain in a single pipeline with immutable objects as much as possible. We want this to be automated because the more automation you have, the more you can, have consistent data that you're always pulling and adding that traceability. You want approval gates that are, tied down with centralized role-based access controls on all of the artifacts and approvals going across the process. Outputs, inputs, commands that were run, everything should be collected in one place, as well as the outputs from the external tools in your processes. You want end-to-end visibility, and hopefully on top of all of this, one-click automated audit reports that's built on this trusted data. So looking at an example pipeline, in this case, the release pipeline becomes the audit trail. We recommend that the automation should be across the entire process in one release pipeline, where you're building the audit data right into that pipeline. So as I said, this pipeline itself becomes that audit trail. The pipeline takes the code from developer all the way to production, integrating with all of the tools across the process. So you can see all of the tools that we had in our example are all orchestrated by this one pipeline, and then you're collecting the audit data from all of these tools in one place. So when it comes time to audit, you just come right to this pipeline. Access controls and compliance gates in the pipeline ensure that the process is being followed, and also that authorized users are taking action and tracking who did what in the pipeline audit trail itself. So you're not, there isn't room for someone to come in and do something out of the process. And if somebody does do something that needs to be looked back at, it's authorized it by RBAC, and it is traceable, so you can go back and look at the pipeline run and see exactly what happened. So here's an example of a pipeline run. You can see the stages going from dev to production, with tasks calling all of the tools and automating the steps along the way. There are automated and manual gates between the stages to control promotion to the next stage. And for each step, there's full traceability into what happened with the exact commands that were run and log outputs for the step, and metadata as well, as evidence that's being generated. So the pipeline is going all the way from dev to production. We have the stages, we have the steps with everything traceable in one place. In the white box is a set of evidence that has been generated in the dev stage with links to evidence like JIRA reports, Sonar CubeScan results, build outputs, and more. So you're centralizing access and visibility to all of the data, whether it was run in this tool or it was run in a separate tool, everything is available from this pipeline run. So when that audit comes along, you're not jumping between tools, logging into another tool to find and track down the artifact or build commit. Instead, everything is right here in one place, easily accessible with all of the logs, inputs, outputs, and users associated with the tasks ready to be collected and submitted. So we need to have traceability across CI and CD processes, providing a central place to see all data from code commit all the way to production. And here you can see, in that same pipeline run, the CI builds associated with the release pipeline, all collected and stored in one place. So you get the build details with outcomes, logs, code commits that triggered the build, test results, and artifact versions that were generated. All of this data is collected in the pipeline and available for ease of creation of audit reports. And to make it even easier when an audit event occurs, it's best to automatically generate those common audit reports and remove that step of even coming to the pipeline to collect the pieces you need. So let me go through a few examples of these reports. The first here is the approvals audit, where an auditor wants to know who did what in a release, who touched this release. And the approvals audit provides that visibility into all manual and automated gates that promoted the pipeline to the next stage, as well as any manual steps in the process, so who ran what, and any comments that were part of that as well. So you're capturing who made the approval, comments included, conditions met, for automated gates as well, so to see exactly why the pipeline progressed into the production environment. This next report is the evidence report that pulls together all evidence generated by each stage of the release in one easy to access view. So again, this evidence could be from processes that are automated within the pipeline, like a deployment showing, what was deployed where, but also pulling the data from all of the tools and processes run throughout the pipeline. So you can see it broken down by each stage and what are the outputs, like those test results, the Git commit links, the Jira reports. Everything is available in one place, so you can easily access it and have it available for your audit. The last one is the duration report that gives visibility into how long the release pipeline took with breakdowns in each task. So if timelines are not met, if there are late releases, you can easily go back and identify why this happened and highlight on manual steps to see if there were issues introduced by manual intervention. So let's look at how we can start getting to this place of audit-ready pipelines. So auditing the new way, automation is auditing. When you automate the entire process, the pipeline definition becomes the documentation of what you're going to do. So you can look at that and see what is expected when I run this pipeline. And then when you run the pipeline, you automatically create your audit trail. Everything is automated. You're generating all of the results, collecting everything within that pipeline run. So if you have to go back, tomorrow, if you have to go back in a year from now, you can go back to that one pipeline run and see exactly what happened from the start to the end with all of the data collected in one place within that pipeline run. You don't have to worry about dependency on whether these other tools still even have that data or not. And a key part of that is that orchestration layer on top of everything so that all of the data is collected in that pipeline, and then creating those one-click audit reports, making it very easy to generate a report that has all of the data you need. So here are our 7 steps to audit-ready pipelines. The first in this is getting the key stakeholders involved at the beginning. And these key stakeholders are not just the auditors, not just the security teams, but everyone, the developers, release managers, app owners, quality teams. Everyone needs to be together and start communicating and finding a common language for discussing the pipeline, the delivery pipeline from start to finish, and understanding this process all together. You want all of these key stakeholders in a room and start looking at your value stream. And what we suggest is conducting a value stream mapping exercise, which might be a really big whiteboard where you come together and map out the entire process to understand all of the steps. And a lot of the times, no one person in that room is going to know all of those steps because you're working in your silos, very focused on the pieces of the process that you need to deliver and hand off without knowing what happens next or what happened before you. And so by creating this whole value stream map, you can see the whole process, identify areas where you can add more automation, identify areas that might be vulnerabilities in your process. And as you're going through this, you want to focus on the data that you're going to need in each step to collect in this audit ready pipeline. So what are the inputs and outputs of these steps that you want to make sure you're collecting in your automation, so you can go back and have that in the pipeline run when you need to audit it. What this really does is kind of forcing you to take a holistic approach to how software gets delivered from development all the way to production. And you're not anymore looking at just one piece of that, but everybody gets to see the whole process. You have common visibility across everything. And what it does is really gives the teams ownership of the whole process, rather than really just focused on the one task that they were involved in. So this holistic approach is great because you get to see the process and everyone gets that visibility across what happened. It's important to look as you're building out this process and identify areas where there may be vulnerabilities. Being able to identify, drift in your environments, getting the visibility into the environments themselves, controlling your tests, making sure tests are running as they should with all of the inputs that they should, having that traceability and visibility into those processes. So during that mapping exercise, identifying those potential vulnerabilities and making sure that you're ahead of them. You, at any time in this process, you want to have visibility into what is in your production environment. So that visibility is very important, and not only in production, but across your environments, making sure you have consistency of process. So what you're testing and deploying in your lower environments is what is in production. So, as you're going through all of this process, a big part of it is prioritizing culture. The pipeline itself can change culture and hopefully will bring people together, because it is creating this common understanding and this common place for visibility across the process. We all work together. We all are working towards this one goal, and everyone has ownership of the success of your software delivery in the pipeline, rather than just focusing on that one task. So that's a great part of this. But it can be challenging. Not everyone is going to come on board immediately. People have the ways they've worked, and change is hard. And so it's not something you can just push across an entire organization in one step. So don't try to boil the ocean. Take it one step at a time. We generally recommend picking one application, one team to start with as an MVP. Start building that pipeline across it. Maybe you're not going to be able to automate every step in that yet, but create that orchestration layer. You'll have maybe a few more manual steps, but slowly you can iterate and improve, and then see the value of having that pipeline for that one team, and start creating practices, and then step back and show that value to others in your organization, and create a template based on that pipeline that brings those practices in a more general way across your organization. And then teams will hopefully get to see that value, and the cultural change will come as teams start to onboard and see how these pipelines are able to change the way they deliver software, bring common visibility, make these audit processes so much easier. So don't expect it to be a one-step process. It's a journey getting to this place, but it's well worth it if you take the time and plan it properly. So, I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and please feel free to ask questions. Thank you so much.